Thank you, Christy. That was beautiful. All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning. Dennis stepped in kind of at the last minute because our dear Bev is not feeling well today. So send her some healing in our final prayer. But yeah, I want to introduce Dennis Alstrand. He's a really good speaker. He's a wonderful member of this congregation. He's a wonderful volunteer and does lots of volunteer things out with the Special Olympics out in the community. And he's my husband. I think he's awesome. So let's welcome Dennis Alstrand.
If you got to give a talk at the last minute, it's good to follow Christy. She just got me right in the mood. Abundance. I want to talk today not specifically about political ends or means or who I'm for or against or whatever, but I would like to talk about politics. And there is a reason that stapled that into my mind that happened last night. I want to talk about peace, finding peace in ourselves in politics, finding peace in what's happening and what's going to happen. Doesn't mean scary things are out there or are not out there, but to find peace in them. And so I had done this successfully. I realized last night, because I got a call from a friend who's a very staunch liberal, and he goes, "How you doing?" I went, "Great, man." He goes, "How you doing with all this stuff?" And I thought he must be talking about that storm that we had. I went, "You mean the storm?" He goes, "No, about this new president we have. It's the most horrible thing that's in the world," and that kind of stuff. Went on like that for a while. I realized, so I had given a talk at our Toastmasters group last Tuesday about the election, about my thoughts about politics, peace in politics. And I thought maybe it's time to drag that right back out again. It got a good reception from liberals and conservatives alike, and I hope I don't give away which one I am in this talk, because that's not what this is about. Since we don't proselytize here, that's why I call it, it works for me. Because this is what worked for me, and maybe it works for you too. What's on my mind? Finding peace in politics and inner politics. Getting past us versus them. I.e., we're smart, but oh boy, are those other guys stupid. Inner politics, I had to convert my inner politics from victimhood to being a winner. I don't like being a victim. I don't like having my friends feel like victims. So I had to do that. I refused to be one. And it's a choice that we all make. So I did. I set forth this motion that no matter who wins, I'll find a way to make the best of it. I will make the best of it. I'd already voted. So that was out of my hands, even though we don't have a lot of say in Hawaii and in the national spectrum of politics. But I did vote. And as time went on, and even now, I wanted to see, how do I get past this us versus them thing? And I visited regular media. You know, there's Fox News and there's CNN, and they both say the same thing about each other. It's almost like you just changed the names. Boy, are those guys stupid over there. I visited comedy media like, The Daily Show and that sort of thing, and I've realized their entire existence is to make the other guy look like an idiot, and the people that vote for them look like idiots too. So I went to social media. I went to Facebook. I went to my conservative friends, and here's what they think. Boy, are those guys stupid. So I went to my liberal friends. Here's what they think. Boy, are those guys stupid. So my conclusion is that everyone's just kind of following one-sided news. And I tried to find news that's not one-sided. It is not findable. You know, everyone goes, follow the BBC, but you can listen to the BBC all day and there's maybe 20 minutes of news somewhere. Angerifying to me. Instead of going online, I need to go inline. That's what I need to do. You will find what you seek. Truer words, I don't know if have ever been spoken. If you're looking for danger, you will find it. I grew up in a town that wasn't real friendly. There's two races that were involved, and I was the victim as a young man all the time. I'd get beat up and beat up again. Finally, one day, this guy was going to beat me up yet again, and I got into my mind, I'll try to leave the cuss words out of this thought. In my mind, you might beat me up. You might take me to the hospital, but you're taking you to the hospital with me. You're going down, pal. And the guy seemed to just sense this, and he kind of went, all right. Here's little Dennis going, this works? Every 4 years, with some exceptions, there are people who seek victimhood. He's going to take away our rights. He's another Hitler. He's soft. The first campaign that I remember kind of following was in 1964. It was Lyndon Johnson versus Barry Goldwater. And you might remember the commercial where there's a little girl counting something on a flower, and then all of a sudden an atom bomb goes off. Lyndon Johnson got elected based on that fear. People were afraid of nuclear war in those days. 1968, if you think this was a bad year for politics or a hard year for politics, I stacked 1968 up against every one of them with the exception of two that I think were worse. In 1968, Martin Luther King was shot and killed during the election process, not saying it was political. 1 week later, Robert Kennedy, the Democratic nominee, was shot and killed. Not long after that, George Wallace, who was an independent third party person, was shot and not killed, but he was paralyzed for life. 1968 also had the riots at the Democratic Convention in Chicago. This was a huge, huge, bad year. Vietnam raged, and it had a lot to do with how we felt about things. 68 sucked. In 1972, it was Nixon versus McGovern. McGovern, who had flown 35 flights, missions over occupied Europe, versus Nixon, who was in the Navy somewhere. Colin McGovern soft. That's my memory of that particular one. The first one that I was able to vote to, because they lowered the age to 18, was Jimmy Carter versus Gerald Ford. This was in 1976. And Gerald Ford had pardoned Richard Nixon. Seemed like a good move to him, but it pardoned the rest of his career as well, and he lost the election to Jimmy Carter. In 1980, Reagan versus Carter. Unfortunately for Jimmy Carter, at that time, the Iranian hostages, you remember those? 52 hostages being held for over a year. He's soft, and he's soft on it, and Reagan won. Let's jump ahead a little bit to 1988. It was George Bush Sr. versus Michael Dukakis. Two memories from that. One is this commercial about Dukakis as mayor of Massachusetts had let this guy named Willie Horton out of prison on a furlough, and he went and killed some people. And that was the whole basis of George Bush's politics, his conventioning, or his campaigning, and he won the election. In 1996, he's another Hitler, but Bill Clinton was saying that Bob Dole was going to be another Newt Gingrich, which was just about as bad for liberals at that time. I'm not saying for everybody, but for liberals at that time. He's going to take away our freedoms. In 2000, how many of us remember the 2000 campaign and the election? That was the first time that global warming was brought forward, and Al Gore had a big part with that. But that was the election that came down to the wire, and it came down to Florida. It always comes down to Florida. And that was still a tie, so it came down to a county in Florida, and that was still a tie. Remember, we're counting Chads now. Everyone remembers Chads. It was still a tie, and it went to the Supreme Court, and as far as I know, it was only the second time that the Supreme Court ever issued the proclamation, and they made George Bush the president, George Bush Jr. In 2004, it was George Bush Jr. versus John Kerry, and the cry was he's going to take away our gay rights, our women's rights, and abortion rights. And it happened to be things to actually be concerned about. that was the battle cry. In 2008, it was Obama versus John McCain, and that was, I think, the last semi-respectful campaign that we've had. Barack Obama versus John McCain. The best advice that Obama could follow is that John McCain's a Republican and he's been with George Bush for the last 8 years. And so I think that's what kind of took it for Obama. That's how he won that one. Since then, the political climate has heated up. It has heated up. Trump versus Clinton. She's going to let foreigners into the country is the battle cry, and kind of still is. And hers was, he and his followers are a basket of deplorables, bigots, and extremists. Trump won that one, as we all remember. Biden versus Trump in 2020. He's not going to only let foreigners in, he's going to let criminal foreigners in. They'll be over the borders. And in 2024, say no more. But if you think this was a bad one, I look back at the 1796 election. That was the election, almost of all elections. It was the second most divisive campaign of all time. It was a bitter one, with Federalists attempting to identify the Democrat Republicans with the violence of the French Revolution. And it was heated. The Democratic Republicans, Thomas Jefferson, accusing the Federalists of favoring monarchism and aristocracy. The country was new. It could easily have gone into being a monarchy again and away from the republic that it is. I saved the worst for last. 1860, Abraham Lincoln versus Stephen Douglas, out of which, about the day that Abraham Lincoln was elected president, 11 states seceded from the Union and the Civil War started. Those are terrible times, and there's good books to read that kind of take you back to those times. When I read it, I was thinking, this election wasn't so bad, Somehow through all of this, and I mean this strongly, our republic has stayed true. I know we're not a democracy, but our republic has stayed true. I mentioned this at the top here. I don't think there's any room. This is going to be controversial for those who feel victimized right now. I don't feel there's any room for victimhood. I know that there's certain things that I'm going to be very vigilant about. My gay friends, if there's problems, I'm going to be with you. I'll be gay with you. My women friends, I'm going to have a little harder time being women, and my abortion friends, I'm not going to be pregnant with you, but I will be on the lines. I will be on the lines, but as John Lennon said, I'll be at the barricades, but with flowers. That'll be me. I'll be there with peaceful thoughts, but vigilant thoughts. For right now, I will never point fingers at those who think differently than me and wonder why they think that way. It is time for vigilance, but it is time for peace. Peace on earth is possible, no ifs, ands, or buts, and I don't think so. I left one thing when I talked about rights. I remember when Rabbi Rachel was talking about the Jews having a really hard time in America during these days. The attack was on. She couldn't go to a store identified as Jewish. And so I got a star at David. I went proudly walking around town, walking into stores. And I'm saying all this, this is important also. I'm not saying this because your fears are not justified. Fears are fears, and there's justification for them if you have them. I'm just saying I turn those fears into being a winner, and that's what I'm hoping that everyone here will be in the next 4 years. Show up. It's me who must hold this in my heart. I'll keep fighting for the good. I will keep showing up. I will keep loving. I will keep being kind. I will keep being brave. The world needs you to believe in the good. So I did vote, and I detached from news, and I waited the outcome. Our vote is our power. I told myself, whoever wins, there'll be peace on earth. And here was my aha moment that we all stood up here and talked about. In that last class that we had that Rev Bev gave, she was sitting there watching us, and I kind of noticed it. Because there's just a lot of discussion. There's a lot of challenging questions, and this was the challenging question. She said, wait a minute, you guys. Do you believe there can be peace on earth? And we all just started rumbling and roaring. Arr, arr, arr. No peace on earth ever, She goes, no, wait a minute. Do you believe there can be peace on earth one by one? And I was saying, I don't think so. And so what she talked about, and this was my aha moment in that class, peace on earth is possible. This is quoting Reverend Bev. The catch is to believe it's possible with no ifs, ands, or buts. It's hard to wrap our belief system around the concept. We make conditions. If we make conditions before we say there can be peace on earth. And one of the conditions is if only they changed, or if only this changed, we would then have peace on earth. So for all those who are afraid, I'm with you. I'm standing tall with you in love and light. Ernest Holmes, this is back in the 1950s. I don't think any of us were around then, were we? No, some of us were. I was. I was born in Eisenhower's days. Ernest Holmes said, I know that success, prosperity, and happiness are the gifts of freedom. I know that no one can be led to believe that freedom must be surrendered in order to ensure economic security for all. Ernest Holmes said, the all-knowing mind of God contains the answer to every problem which confronts this country. And I know that spiritual democracy shall endure, guaranteed to everyone in this country personal liberty, happiness, and self-expression. That was Ernest Holmes in the 1950s. I'm going to add to that two things that really helped me through this process. One is the science of mind teaching. And he says it here. The all-knowing mind of God contains the answer to every problem which confronts this country. And I also found a lot of light and love and power from going online to social media to Reverend Bev's Facebook page. She took the last week or so, and first of all, during Election Day, there was a group of us that were here with a candle vigil for peace in this building. It was beautiful. It was really wonderful. I felt very strong peace that day. And those of us who are here, we didn't even talk about politics or who we hope has won or who we didn't hope has won. There was a lot. Who made it there that day? Who made it here that day? Look, a lot of hands. Did you find peace that day? All right. Reverend Bev was a godsend. In her Facebook page, here's some quotes where she's quoting others, and she quotes Stacy Campanelli. Trust in your abilities to be a beacon of light, love, and hope, and celebrate all that's good, true, and worthy. Celebrate all that's good, true, and worthy. She paraphrased Ram Dass. Whether this is the first day of the apocalypse or the first day of the golden age, the work remains the same, to love each other and ease as much suffering as possible. So I had that call from my friend who talked about fear, and I understand the fear, and I'm with you. Earlier today, I went up to Ray Ryan back there. I can almost do the entire quote. I said, Ray, how you doing? He goes, oh, fine. I went, no, how you doing regarding politics and the things that are going on? The partial quote is, he goes, I know there's a new president, but I don't give a flying. I think that's the best advice of all, Ray. Put news aside, put politics aside, and live in peace. I'm with you all. I love you all. Thank you.